Hey, real quick, I just want to know who's here and whether you are a leader or a pastor in your church. And so if you are a pastor in your church, would you just raise your hand if you're a pastor in your church? All right, excellent, good number of us. And if you are a leader of a ministry area in your church, would you raise your hand? Good number of others of us? Okay, excellent. And I want to know what cities you're from. So just shout me down for a second. What's your city? Okay. Long Beach. Santa Ana. Garden Grove. Okay, Santa Barbara. They're busy. All right. Okay. Well, I'm so glad that you've come to this track today. Here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is Pastor Larry Wackemeyer, Pastor Brian Warth, and me have spent some time together thinking about this idea of a multiplication mindset. And we've put together a track that I think is going to be valuable for you. And here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take some time to talk about the priority of people development and challenge you to embrace a healthy kingdom mindset through developing people. And then Pastor Brian is going to bring you a word on the grit that it takes to really get stuff done when it comes to multiplying. And then Pastor Larry is going to share with you about the mobilization flywheel concept that he's developed that really puts action to all of the concepts that we're going to talk about. So before I dive in, I just wanted to bring you a good report. The church I lead, if you don't mind, do you like hearing about good stuff that God does? Okay, so I'm just personally excited about this. And I want to give glory to God for what I have seen God do recently. This past Easter, we had a record number of people in our Easter weekend. We had 6,200 people at our Easter experience. And I celebrate that. I want to celebrate that, and here's why. Because 15 years ago, when I came to the annual conference, I was leading a church that at that time had 75 people in it. And so just what I just shared with you, big picture, the reason I share that is not to try to take some kind of credit, but to create some kind of hope. I just want anybody to know that that's possible. I never want us to think about impossibilities. I want us to think about what God is able to do. And God took a kid that didn't ever do this before, that didn't really know what he was doing, and simply allowed me to have a group of people that had some vision and faith, and we keep on walking through, like Pastor Charles shared this morning, Superintendent Charles shared, that open door that God is able to create. And so, and let me share another thing about that. What that big old number represents is families that are being made whole. It represents students that are coming to know Jesus. That one weekend, in 10 Easter services, we had 672 people make a decision for Jesus Christ. That is something worth celebrating. It's amazing. That is God on the move. And I want to just share with you, 15 years ago, if you would have asked me if I would have ever imagined that I'd be sharing a report like that, I probably would have laughed. I don't know if I even had the faith in me to believe for that. All I knew was, I'm going to take each next right step and believe that God is on the move and wants people to know his mercy and his love. So big picture, I think all of us, the reason why we're here, the reason why we are at this annual conference, why we raised our hand because we're pastors, we raised our hand because we're leaders in our church, is because we believe in the mission of Jesus, that he's still on the move, seeking and saving the lost, and that he's invited you and me to be part of how he's going to do that. And we've decided that matters, and I'm going to go after that. God's called me to be about that. And so here we are. We're gathering for an annual conference, and we're going to tool up so that we can do that mission even better. And so I'm doing it with my eyes on Jesus. I don't know about you, but I'm fixing my eyes on Jesus because there's a lot of other stuff that gets my attention. I shared with you the highlight of this past year for me. What I didn't share with you is the extreme low light. Losing our number 2 guy due to a moral failure and processing, months and months of deep level pain with hundreds and hundreds of people, and how much energy that takes, how much problem that causes, how much devastation that brings about, right? And I want you to know that between the highlight that I just shared with you of so many people coming to know Jesus in one weekend and then the extreme low light, there's this tension. And the only way to make it through the tension is to keep your eyes on Jesus. And so I wanted to just ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to just read this scripture out loud with me from the screen. Ready? Say it with me. We fix our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. This is what we're talking about today, fixing our eyes on Jesus, because he's the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. He's the hero that we're going to be following after. And what I want to share with you in this message is an idea that I discovered in a book by Dave Ferguson called Hero Maker. And we've processed this book as a staff team at Centerpoint Church, and we're putting into practice some of what we've heard in this book. And I want to share that from the outset with you, that we are in process of trying to live in such a way that we're following Jesus, the ultimate hero maker, in a journey of making heroes out of other people. So I want to just shift into the first part of this talk, and it's just simply this: think Jesus. Everyone say, think Jesus. Okay, we're going to think Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate hero maker. And I want us to just think about this together. Think about Jesus and the different scenes that come to your mind about Jesus. And when you think Jesus, maybe you think about a scene like in Mark chapter 5, where Jesus comes into the area of the Gerasenes and delivers a guy who was oppressed by demons. Or maybe you might think of something a little earlier and a little further back, and you'd think of Matthew 4:19, and Jesus just saying, "Come follow me. I'll show you how to fish for people." Jesus, when he saw those guys fishing, his first thought was, how can I make them into something even greater? Yeah. Right? He saw them fishing and he thought, I have a way to lift them up. I have a way to make them something more in the future than they even are right now. His way of looking at people was through a lens of their capacity. Jesus was looking at people through a lens of what they could be in the future. Jesus was looking at people with a view towards what was inside of them that hadn't been revealed yet. And I want to be a hero maker like Jesus that would follow him in that way of looking differently at people. And maybe you might think of Mark chapter 6, verse 7, where Jesus took his disciples and said, I give you authority. He gave them authority over all the demons. You know what? Jesus had all the authority, but his desire was to give the authority away. If we're going to talk about being hero makers, we need to have that in our minds, that we got to look for ways to do like Jesus did and said, I have the authority, but here, you have some. Here, I want you to have some. Here, I want you to take it and run with it. He's the hero maker. In Matthew 10, verse 1, he sends out the 12 and gives them authority to drive out every kind. Someone say every kind. Every kind of evil, sickness, and disease. He didn't keep their scope limited. He was looking at the big picture, and he wanted to ensure that they knew they had the opportunity to use that authority to deal with every kind of demonic thing, every kind of illness. And as we are making heroes out of people in our church, we've got to open up the scope to what they can actually make a contribution and do. Maybe you might think about Matthew 10:8, where he said, go preach the gospel and heal the sick and raise the dead. And people might have thought, wait a minute, Jesus, isn't that your specialty? Isn't that the thing that you are supposed to be able to do? And Jesus apparently didn't feel that way about it. Jesus wanted even the thing that was his special deal to be that which his disciples could also do. A hero maker is going to look for a way to give even the very best that God has given to you into the hands of someone else. In Matthew 28, Jesus said, go into all the world, making disciples in my name, teaching them to do everything I said. Jesus wanted to raise up heroes that would find their way out into the world. And that's very different than just come to my synagogue and sit in my little circle and listen to me, because I love that. But no, I want you out there. I want you into the world. I want your light to shine even farther away from this place than I am and could ever be. And so this is what a hero maker does. John 14:12, Jesus said, you will do even greater things. And we stumble over that. We're like, I don't know if did he really mean that? He really meant that. Jesus was looking at a group of people that might not have seen themselves as being able to do anything great, let alone something even greater than what Jesus did. But that's how he saw them. He saw the capacity, the potential, what was yet to be. And so that's what we want to lean into. A hero maker is a leader, first of all. And I want to get that in our mind. A hero maker is a leader who shifts from being the hero to making others the hero in God's unfolding story. This is what a hero maker is a leader who shifts from being the hero to making others the hero in God's unfolding story. Isn't that a good sentence? Isn't that a good summary? But do you know how hard that is? It's hard because we got this little thing called an ego. And we need to get over it. We need to decide here and now, this is about the kingdom of God, not about the kingdom of me. And so I'm going to give away whatever he's given to me. I'm going to find the responsible, reasonable ways to give away whatever he's put inside of me. At the Spirit's leading, I'm going to impart that to whoever I can possibly impart that to and be a hero maker. I'm going to shift from being the hero, the one who does it all, the one who has to be the linchpin of it all, the one who's going to give all the answers. Instead, I'm going to let others find their place in being the hero in God's unfolding story. All right, so here's what I hope that we would do today. I hope that we would shift our mindsets. And so that's number 3. I hope we would shift our mindsets and then shift our cultures. Shift our mindsets and shift our cultures. When I think about the history of the church I lead, 15 years and growing from, 50 or 60 people to 2,700 people, something like that, the one thing that I can identify, I mean, the easy answer is just to say, oh, God did it all, and he certainly did. He gives the increase. But in terms of the decisions that I've made and that our team has made, I think it really gets down to having a mindset shift, first and foremost. And shifting your mindset will lead to a shift in your culture. And in the church I lead, the first mindset shift had to be one of growth, just deciding we're going to grow, we're going to reach people, and deciding that the mission of Jesus matters enough. You've got to determine today, I'm going to shift my mindset, and that's going to lead to a shift in the culture. And so here's what I mean specifically, though, about a mindset shift. I think that we need to make a mindset shift from ministry happens by me doing it all into instead, ministry happens through leaders being multiplied. That's a shift that has to happen in our minds. Ministry happens through me doing it all. To instead, ministry happens through leaders being multiplied. This is what we've got to step into. We need to shift our mindset from whenever there's ministry to be done, my first thought is, I see what I can do. And instead, we need to shift to, I see what others could possibly do if I could just release them into it. But that's a mental shift. We've got to break our default mental mindset. A third shift would be, I add followers to my team. And shift from that instead to, I share what I can. I empower other disciples to do and lead. It's noble to want to serve and do. It's not that it's bad to want to serve and do, but there's a higher and greater kingdom impact that can happen if you would choose to shift your mindset to, I'm not just about me doing it, I'm about me empowering and releasing other people to do it. And we're going to shift from, I'm asking God to bless my use of my gifts, and instead shifting to, I'm asking God to bless the leaders that I'm raising up so that they could use their gifts. Right. And it's beautiful when it happens. It brings so much glory to God. We've got to make a shift from, I'm counting how many people are showing up to my thing. And instead, we're beginning to also count how many leaders we're raising up and releasing. These kinds of mental mindset shifts, I think, will lead to the kind of productivity, the kind of kingdom results that all of us are hoping for. But it starts with that mental mindset shift. So here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping all of us would just get something inside of us that would say, I want to be a hero maker. I want to be known for not just what I personally did, but I want to be known for how I helped other people rise up and take their place as heroes in this great kingdom of God story. I want to be a hero maker. I think that's something that God is looking for each of us. Let me ask you this. If you would think about your own story, can you identify one person's name who was a hero maker to you? And maybe right now, just for a minute, just think of that person's name. There might be lots of them, but just think of a name or two. That one person, they're the one who, however they did it, they grabbed hold of you and kind of lifted you up and kind of pushed you out of the nest into some kind of kingdom weight-bearing responsibility. And I just want to hear you say their names out loud. Just a few of you. Just lift their name up. Just say, come on, right? These people were hero makers, and you're the better for it. Chances are, if I were to dive a little deeper, chances are they didn't all do it perfectly. You know, some of them might have made some mistakes, and maybe they steered you wrong in one little area or another, or maybe they didn't quite do it. But the bottom line is, on the whole, they helped you rise up and get out, and you needed that. And now it's on us to be those who would be hero makers in a like way. I think about this. For me, I had rededicated my life to Jesus when I was in college. And I'll spare you the details, but long story short, you know, my life kind of crashed and burned, and I was deeply broken and in a lot of pain. And it was this woman, Tanya Perez, and her husband, but mostly her, who discipled me. I'd never really been discipled before, but she met with me and a couple of other people every week and discipled me, had us read certain chapters of the Bible and read a couple of books back in the day, and helped me rise up. And then she said, we need new leaders for this college fellowship. And I think it's you, and you, and you, and pointed to a group of us and allowed us to be the leaders. She had a vision to reach that college campus, Rutgers University. But the way she accomplished her vision was by saying, you, and you. And then she sat back. And then we rushed in. And I'll always be grateful for Tanya Perez, because she challenged me to not just sit and receive ministry, but to roll up my sleeves and jump in and do something and reach people. That will always be one of the highlights of my discipleship story. And for us to rise up as disciple makers, as hero makers, is really about doing that for some other people along the way. And so I want to share with you 5 practices of hero makers. And so the first one is simply this: dream big and invest in others to multiply your impact. Dream big and invest in others to multiply your impact. First of all, dream big. I think that you probably need to make sure you're taking time regularly to check in with your Heavenly Father to say, this area of ministry that I lead, this church that I lead, God, what is your big dream for us? What do you desire to do through us? And let Him prompt you with something that might even feel a little outlandish. I mean, dream big looks like dreaming about taking something on that goes beyond what you could do by your own strength. And I think it's honoring to God when we embrace a God-sized dream for the ministry that we are leading, that we're investing in. But you dream big and then strategically invest in others to multiply your impact. Think Jesus. Remember, think Jesus. Jesus invested in Peter and James and John, those 3, so deeply. Hours of His life poured into them. Jesus invested in those 12 strategically, a little bit differently than He invested in the 3. And then Jesus, He had the 70 or 72, depending on the gospel. It's a little bit different strategic choice with those 70. But He made that choice to say, how I'm going to allocate my time is going to be about pouring into other people. Now, for any of us who are, let's just say, 45 and younger, I think the proposition is starting to become a little bit more difficult, because we live in a social media-driven age where there's such a tendency to want to pour our energy into making our own platform look great in front of lots of people. But that's different from actually pouring into people. And I think this is the need of the hour, is for more of us to decide, I'm strategically investing in not just my own platform development, but I'm strategically investing in people that God has called me to love and develop. And it will take time, it will take energy, it will take emotional investment, but it is what we're called to. Hero Maker practice number 1 is multiplication thinking. Just multiplication thinking. Rather than only thinking about what you can do, thinking about how much more could be accomplished if you would take time to invest in your 3, your 12, your 70, and to really do so with the end, not just of comforting them or making them feel better, but really raising them up to do what they have been called to do, and challenging them to take on new assignments that maybe they've been hesitant about giving them the resourcing they need to be able to rise up and take their place for the glory of God. You know, I was with Bishop Matt about 7 years ago on a trip, I think, to Hong Kong, and I was asking him, hey, how did you develop pastors when you were the pastor of Timberlake Church and Timberview, sorry. And he said, well, I did this thing, I called it MIT, Ministers in Training. And he described it, said, I got these young gals or young guys together and just, poured into them and taught them what to do. I was in a stage where the church was growing a lot, and I'm going, how in the world are we going to have enough ministers to do all this ministry? And I had asked him, and he said, yeah, MIT, that's what I did. And I came home from that trip and just did the exact same thing. I even called it MIT. Just wanted to do exactly what my bishop told me, which was to get a group of people around you that you can pour into and teach them what you know. I mean, you might not know everything, but you know enough to do this much, so take that and pour it into some people. And so I did that. I started a group called MIT. That was about 7 years ago. And I call it P49 now. And that's just what we call it at Centerpoint. It's from Philippians 4:9. It says, whatever you've seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. And so I have my P49 group, and every year, twice a year, I pick 7 to 9 people, and I select them. They don't get to vote themselves in, or there's no process like that. It's kind of the Jesus style. You, come follow me, So I pick 7 to 9 or so of our younger leaders or newer leaders or people that I feel like have a potential calling and future in pastoral ministry. And we get together for 2 hours every other week for a few months. And I teach them whatever I can, how to do weddings, how to do funerals, how to lead sacraments, how to lead through change, character issues, pastoral care visitations, leadership development, how to minister in supernatural gifts of prophecy and healing. All of these things that I feel like are important for ministers and pastors in the church I lead to know my heart on and my way on. And looking back now, I can see, 30 or 40 people that have come through this, and many of whom are our staff now, and many of whom are staff in other people's churches now, but they got raised up. They got to be developed. They got to learn how to do the meat of ministry. And I don't know that I taught them perfectly, but I taught them what I know. I learned that from my bishop, and it works. It's a good way to approach ministry. So I guess a challenge that I would have for you is, I started this at Centerpoint Church, P49, because we needed ministers. And there's just no ministry tree to go pluck them from. And you grow them. The bottom line is you grow them. And so what could you do in your church to do something similar? To just decide, no matter how many people are in your congregation, but to decide, we're going to have a multiplication mindset. And so we're going to find a way to develop new leaders in a way that we can pour in everything that has been poured into us. It's something that I think is absolutely necessary. And who knows the legacy you might leave if you would choose now to do that. Choose now to put something like that in process. So that was number 1, multiplication things. Number 2, say yes. This is a hero maker mindset. Say yes and give authority and responsibility to others. Bottom line, say yes and give authority and responsibility to others. I want to just take you back to what I started with. Think Jesus. He could have just done it all. Could have, everywhere he went, just kept on doing it all. But his mindset was, how can I see James and Peter and John step up and do it? How can I see Bartholomew, the little spoken of disciple, step up and do it? The 12, the 72, think Jesus. Find the way to share the authority, to give the responsibility to others. One of the things that for me is sometimes a bit of a barometer is, we have a larger staff. In a larger church, you end up having a lot more people that are part of your staff team. But I remember coming into a meeting. Actually, I don't want to say I remember as though it was distant history. This happens from time to time, and it's a barometer to me. I was in one meeting, and the upshot of whatever the meeting was about was, well, we couldn't decide on this because you weren't here. And I came out from that meeting going, I have failed. If you couldn't decide because I wasn't here, then I failed. I have failed to give the permission the way it needed to be given. And I wonder if any of us as leaders need to reconcile with that little problem, like I continually have to. It is giving the clarity to people that they have the permission to make the decisions. They have the authority and the responsibility to do it. We have to get out of the way. We have to learn where we are the bottleneck and decide, I need to figure out how to not be the bottleneck. That's a problem that we can solve, but we've got to decide to give the authority and responsibility to others. And really the hero-making practice here is permission giving. That's what we're talking about. Permission giving. Give people permission to do it. Give people permission to try it. Give people permission to make a decision on it. Give people the permission to act on the ideas that they have. Give them permission. They might mess up. So what? People probably still going to get blessed and ministered to and saved and delivered and helped and raised up. Give them permission. Give somebody permission. That's probably how they're going to learn to do the ministry anyway, isn't it? By being given the permission to do something. And you can figure out how to clean up whatever might need to be cleaned up, but if you don't release the permission, there will never be any fruit. And letter B, clarify your delegation and decision-making model. Clarify your delegation and decision-making model. If you're going to give permission, there has to be clarity around decision-making and delegation. And if you can work on your delegation and decision-making model, here's what's going to happen. It's going to multiply leaders. And when you clarify your delegation and decision-making, it becomes a development opportunity. It gives people a chance to try and grow. Delegation will create margin for you. It'll give you extra space and time to be able to do some things that only you can do. And so clarify your delegation and decision-making model. I will share with you that at Centerpoint we have established a delegation and decision-making model that looks like this. And this may be familiar to some of us, but I want you to know that it's instrumental in how I lead at the church that I lead, because it's helpful in providing clarity for people. So here's the delegation and decision-making model. It starts at the bottom where, if you look at the thing on the left, there's less authority and less responsibility, and that's when you ask a person to watch and learn. Can I just ask you right now, who, in whatever you lead, are you at a level 1 with? Or I should say, they're at a level 1 with you. If you can't answer anyone, it may be time to choose to invite some people to watch and learn from you. As if you want to see anybody ultimately able to receive raising up in ministry and help you out, then you better ask them to watch and learn from you and see what God might do. So watch and learn. That's a number 1. And a number 2 is ask and learn and do only if requested. And so at Centerpoint, when we're raising people up, we're getting better at using these numbers to say, hey, you're a 1 on this. Just watch and learn. That's all I expect right now. You're a 2. That means I want you to do it with me. I want you to ask and learn and do it with me. And then number 3 is you could suggest it to me and then do it, but with approval. And then you get a fine line, right? Because anything above this is where a person really gets to be released. And level 4 is do it. Report back afterwards, as soon as possible, but report back afterwards. This is where the clarity is really needed. And at Center Point, we try to ask for this clarity. People will ask me, am I a 3 on this or am I a 4 on this? Because the 3 means you don't really want me to just go ahead and do it. You want to have the control still. But if they say, am I a 3 or 4? And I say, you're a 4, then they know I have authority, I have responsibility. I can really go ahead and act. And then I'll let you know afterwards. This is a key distinction, and it gives people clarity to know, do I really have the room to make this decision or not? Using a nomenclature like this is empowering for people if you use it the right way. And we can ask each other back and forth, and I can say, no, you are a 4 on this, and then they know what to do. Or I can say, actually, no, you are a 3. I mean, here's my reasons why. We have some budgetary constraints, and I really need to make sure I can weigh in. You know, that kind of thing. It matters. And then number 5 is do and report routinely. And routinely might even be once a month, once a quarter, once a year, whatever seems reasonable for the thing that you're releasing them to. But if you could engage a decision-making and delegation model like this, it will give your people clarity, especially when it comes to the line between a 3 and a 4. They will know when they actually have responsibility and authority, and they will be empowered. Use this. Let it become something that you try out. Try it out for a 4-month period in your church or your ministry, your area. See how it goes when there's a little bit more clarity around what you're doing and what level of authority and responsibility you have. And then number 3, prioritize relationships and embrace apprenticeships. Prioritize relationships and implement apprenticeships. Relationships and apprenticeships. When I was a student at Fuller Seminary, I joined the team of Calvary Baptist Church. Yes, I was a Baptist for a short period of time. And this guy, John Hamby, let me be his apprentice. He came in as the new pastor, and I was just the worship guy. But it was only 4 months. But he said, we didn't know it was going to be only 4 months. But he said, I want you to be an apprentice to me. And he let me sit in on his meetings. He let me go to appointments with him. He let me, sit by him if I wanted to when he was preparing a sermon. he let me debrief after, whatever he was doing, whether it was leading a board meeting or leading the weekend service there. And he allowed me to really learn from him by being an apprentice. And it ended up being a short period of time. Like I said, just 4 months. But it made such an impression on me. The fact that he welcomed me into that kind of closeness with him and what it gave me in terms of a mental picture of, here's what it looked like. I also think apprenticeships happen in a different way. Sometimes it's less formal. I referenced traveling to Hong Kong with Bishop Matt. I've had the privilege of traveling to Asia with Bishop Matt 3 times. And for 10 days, being able to be right at the right-hand side of one of our bishops in full bishop mode, I would say I was an apprentice to him. He probably didn't think of it that way, but I definitely did. Every night I would think to myself, wow, what I watched him do today was I watched him speak into these different regional leaders in this particular section of China. And I watched how he listened. I remember how he listened and took to heart, and I just apprenticed by watching him. And we didn't define the relationship that way, but that is something that is always a gift. If you can create structures that allow people to be apprentices, they will gain from you or from that structure, that relationship, lifelong lessons that they can carry into whatever ministry assignment God has for them or that you have for them. Prioritize relationships. The best apprenticeships do have a basis in relationship first. That it's not just about the tasks. It's about who you are as a person. It's about the areas that are your blind spots and someone speaking into them so that those things can be dealt with. It's about caring about what's happening on a personal level. It's about opportunities that you need some guidance on. But prioritize the relationship. The Hero Maker practice number 3 is disciple multiplying. That's really what we're talking about doing, is about disciple multiplying. Sorry, guys, I'm hung up on my slides. If you want to click them forward for me, that would be awesome, because we're way behind. So when it comes to disciple multiplying, one of the things we're doing at Centerpoint is we're starting a school of ministry, because it's not that we you can fill in that blank and the next blank too. Yeah, that's great. So we're starting a school of ministry because we feel like God has done something really good at our church. I mean, there's a lot of great things God has done in all kinds of churches everywhere, but we just recognize there's a unique goodness of what he's done in our church, and we want to see that multiplied. We want to have an opportunity for people to catch that and maybe run into the mission field or some other ministry opportunity with whatever we can pour in. But it's because we want to make disciples. We want to create an apprenticeship model where people can learn as much as possible. Number 4, activate gifts and release leaders into new opportunities. There we go. Activate gifts and release leaders into new opportunities. Activate gifts. In our church circles, one of the things we can do by accident is just think in terms of filling slots. Well, we really need 3 new ushers, and that's what you need. But that's not what God needs. What God needs is people being raised up with all of their kingdom potential. And it may be that serving as an usher could be a part of how they would rise up, but let it be about that, not that. Let it be about the development that God wants to do by activating their gifts. And so rather than just, we need an usher, is we want to activate people in the gift of helps. Come on, somebody. You know the church doesn't work without that gift. We activate gifts, but we also need to activate gifts that maybe we don't take enough time to activate. Gifts like prophecy, gifts like the word of knowledge, gifts like the message of wisdom. I mean, these gifts matter as much as the gift of helps or the gift of leadership or the gift of giving, and we need to take time to activate these gifts and then to release leaders into new opportunities. To activate gifts, I think the scriptures paint a picture of laying hands on somebody, praying for a gift to be activated, and trusting that God will then bring that gift to life. And I think there's got to be moments where we look for a way to do that. Look for opportunities to activate gifts. The Hero Maker practice is gift activating. And so I'm asking you, what are the environments in which you're activating gifts in people? Spiritual gifts. Do you have a moment, where you are actively activating spiritual gifts for people? Could you imagine maybe taking 10 minutes at the end of your worship service, and instead of just closing and saying, amen, go in peace to love and serve the Lord. Maybe you could take 10 minutes and say, we're going to activate spiritual gifts right now. And just begin to invite people to the front and to activate spiritual gifts. Could you envision really asking your small group leaders to have a moment in the small group where they would say, lay hands on somebody in the small group to be activated with a gift of leadership right there in the small group? Wouldn't it be beautiful if the body was functioning that way? It's what we're made for, the gift activation gift. But it's also about releasing leaders into new opportunities. So at Centerpoint, in our youth team, our youth staff had this guy, Daryl, that was part of the youth staff. And Daryl started as a volunteer and served like crazy. And then we ended up bringing him into a part-time role in our youth staff. And he did a lot. And James, our youth pastor, he poured into him and gave him resources and gave him opportunity. And Daryl kept doing the ministry with all his heart. And then we had in our church, our connections department, we needed somebody to step in as the assistant in our connections department. And we just knew, it's Daryl. And so James had poured into Daryl, but had to then release him into a new opportunity. What that requires is letting go of the territorial spirit that can sometimes creep up on us. No, he's mine. He belongs to me. No, he doesn't. He belongs to Jesus. Always did and always will. And Jesus lets you pour into him for a little while and now release him. And so we got to be willing to do this. One of the things that at Centerpoint, based on what we read in the book Hero Maker by Dave Ferguson, that we're trying to look for ways to put into practice is the act of commissioning, where we can lay hands on people and pray for them to feel the empowerment of Jesus come upon them for whatever Jesus ministry they're about to do. And so tonight we get to celebrate ordination, and that's a commissioning at a highest level. But what about at just the micro levels in the church? What it does for a person when we do that is it causes them to feel the fuel and fire of God coming upon them for the work that they're about to do, and it's biblical. And so I'm sharing that this is an area we have a lot to still learn, but maybe you could join me in looking for opportunities to do more commissioning of people in the body of Christ and in the work that people are doing out in the community and in their workplaces and in the world, to know that they're being released into something new in the kingdom. And finally, change the scoreboard. That's crucial. Change the scoreboard. Count who you raise up and not just who comes in. Some of you might know, if you've known me for a while, that 3 years ago, we had up till 3 years ago, we had a guy at Centerpoint named Mike Wilson, who was one of our pastors. He had been my youth pastor, and then I just poured into him. He was part of that MIT group that I just shared about with you, and then he became an associate pastor, and then he became our senior associate pastor, and then after 7 years, he left, and he got called to the Free Methodist Church up in Wenatchee, Washington. And it was heartbreaking for me, because he was one of the guys that had been with me for a long, long time. I felt like I poured so much into him. I felt like, no, he's mine. God has a way of saying, no, he's mine. So listen, a few months ago, I had the chance, Mike invited me to come up to Wenatchee Free Methodist Church, now called Sage Hills Church, and preach there. And when he went to that church, they had 750 or 800 people, something like that. And I got to go up there just a few months ago and preach there. And at the end of the Sunday, he said, John, well, actually, he calls me PJ, short for Pastor John, because he's an honor guy like that. But he said, we had 1,611 people today. And he was so excited because it was a record for them. And, it was awesome for me because it was painful to let go and to release him. I couldn't have kept him anyway. But when I got to go up there, one of their board members took me aside after the service and took me around the corner and looked me in the eye and said, I just want to thank you. And I was like, what? For what? And he said, for what you did in Mike Wilson. You poured into him. You invested in him. You poured so much into him, and we're all blessed now. And this church here in Wenatchee is growing, and it has a lot to do with what you did for those 7 years. And I found myself weeping, that guy would take the time to say that to me. And for me, it was a moment of recognition that, it's okay when your fruit grows on other people's trees. And it's actually, I think, what God really wants is more and more of that kingdom mindset, that we would recognize that it's about kingdom building. And that is the Hero Maker practice number 5. It's about kingdom building. So you change the scoreboard. And the scoreboard becomes less just about how many people came to my thing, but instead, how many people did I raise up and release? And so I'm just starting to mentally change my scoreboard. I feel like I'm doing this way too late. I wish I would have changed this scoreboard way earlier. But I think about it now. I think there's 3 guys that I poured into that are now senior pastors at Free Methodist churches around the country. There's Jeff Awe and Trent Meng and Mike Wilson and then lots of others who are in other levels of ministry leadership in other places. And I got the chance to pour into them. This is new for me. It's just recent to just change the scoreboard and say, that's the best win. That's the biggest win. That's the greatest for the kingdom. And it's hard to keep choosing that scoreboard. There's a default inside of us that just wants to be about, it's about what I'm doing and my thing right here and how many people are coming to it. But I think Jesus wants something so much more, for his kingdom to be established through a raising and releasing of lots of people. And here's why this matters to me. I think that as a denomination, we can do better. I know that we will probably celebrate a moderate level of growth, but in the big picture, related to how many people need to know Jesus, we need a lot more than 3 or 4% of a growth rate. And the only way we're going to get there is if we decide to be disciple-making hero makers, that we would decide this is what matters more than anything, is raising others up and releasing them into the kingdom potential that God has for them. So I'm hoping and praying that we would all rise up and take our place in that way as hero makers. And so if you want to kind of dive more deeply into this, I would encourage you to buy this book by Dave Ferguson, Hero Maker. It's excellent. A lot of what I shared today, the impetus for that comes from that book. But I most of all hope that it would just be something you'd choose to shift your own mindset about. That this is what we'll do. We'll multiply disciples.